So we have chambers in this CSF circulation: lateral ventricle, third ventricle, and the fourth ventricle. When the cerebrospinal fluid will reach the fourth ventricle, it will traverse to the spinal cord, that is the central canal. So spinal cord is also having the cerebrospinal fluid. So what are the connections? So you have interventricular foramina, which are called as the foramen of Monro, and another one is cerebral aqueduct, which is called as aqueduct of Sylvius. So these are the name that you have to remember by heart. कि foramen of Monro है और aqueduct of Sylvius है. So ये दोनों के नाम याद रखना. So this interventricular foramen, you can see here, it is communicating to the third ventricle. Then you have cerebral aqueduct, which is communicating from the third ventricle to the fourth ventricle. Now from the fourth ventricle, the fluid is drained into the central canal of medulla, and then it reaches the spinal cord. These are different structures which are labeled here, and this is also showing you the subarachnoid space where the CSF circulation will occur. So CSF fluid is being holded in the lateral ventricles. It is formed in these ventricles, and then it is circulated towards whole of the brain, that is into the subarachnoid space. So subarachnoid space is holding the CSF fluid. Now from the fourth ventricle, you have two apertures, medial apertures and the lateral apertures, through which this fluid will go towards the arachnoid space. This one is the anterior view, how these lateral ventricles look like from when you see from the anterior side. So this is projecting like a horn. That's why they are called as the anterior horns of the lateral ventricles. When you do the transverse section of the brain, so you cannot see whole of the lateral ventricle at one section. So you will only see the part of the cavity. Some part of the cavity will be lying above the above part of the brain parenchyma. That means towards the frontal and the parietal region of the brain parenchyma, and some part will be lying towards the occipital region, and some will be towards the temporal region. So you cannot see whole of this section in one transverse section. You cannot have a view of a lateral ventricle. So you can just see it by doing either radiography technique. We can see the whole image of this lateral ventricles. Otherwise, when you will see the sections in the anatomy, you cannot see whole of the ventricle at one single section. Now if we see do the coronal section, so we can find the third ventricle. So this is the third ventricle. These are the parts of the lateral ventricles on the coronal section. So these are the coronal section, two parts, right and left lateral ventricles, which is communicating to the third ventricle. Now how this central canal is going downwards from the fourth ventricle. So this is the fourth ventricle, and then you can see this foramen. This is opening into the cistern. This is a cistern. So cistern is a widened space in the arachnoid matter. So it is going towards in the region of cerebellum. Then it is going downwards into the central canal. Choroid plexus we have already discussed. These are invaginated vascular pia matter having the ependymal cells which are present in the ventricular cavities. So if you want to see, this is a web-like structure which is present in the ventricles. Now what is CSF? Very good. कैसा होता है? A clear fluid. पानी जैसा. एकदम clear. Doesn't have any color. How much? What was the quantity? 150 ml. So quantity is 150 ml clear colorless fluid found in the ventricles in the subarachnoid space. Rate of production 0.5 ml per minute. Pressure is 60 to 150 mm of water. Composition, it is having the protein, glucose, chloride and some lymphocytes. Now what is the function of CSF? CSF का function तो सबको पता है. Transportation. Shock absorber. So it cushions the brain. It provides a buoyancy. What was the need of providing the buoyancy? Buoyancy क्यों चाहिए थी brain parenchyma को? So as to the protect the structures and as well as bearing the weight, because buoyancy makes the things lighter. It is acting as a reservoir and assists in the regulation of the content of the skull. Then it nourishes the CNS, it removes the metabolites as well as it provides the nutrition to the brain, and it serves as a pathway for the secretions from the pituitary gland, from the pineal gland. These are the functions of the CSF fluid. Now, site of formation of the CSF main is from the choroid plexus of the ventricles. Some originate from the ependymal cells. Ependymal cells, they are lining the brain parenchyma, and some from the perivascular spaces. So these are the sites of formation. So you can remember the choroid plexus, that would be enough. Now this is how the CSF fluid circulates. So it is formed in the lateral ventricle. Then from the lateral ventricle, it reaches the third ventricle through interventricular foramen. Then through the third ventricle, it goes to the fourth ventricle by cerebral aqueduct. Fourth ventricle is having central as well as lateral apertures. So these lateral apertures, they are called as the Luschka, foramen of Luschka, and middle one, median aperture, is called as the Megendie. So this is median aperture, which is called as foramen of Megendie. Now from there, it reaches the subarachnoid space and down into the in the central canal. But laterally, as it is going, it can be absorbed through the arachnoid villi, through the arachnoid granulations, and it is as well as it is circulating in the subarachnoid space. So this is the chart of how the CSF fluid circulates. याद कर लो तुम दोनों, तुमसे पूछूंगी अभी. Now this is absorption of CSF in the dural venous sinuses. As we were talking about the arachnoid villi and the arachnoid granulation, they do the work of absorption and transferring the fluid towards the bloodstream. Now this is another picture showing you the same similar three layers: dura mater, arachnoid mater, and the pia mater. Now here you can see these are the choroid plexus. So these choroid plexus are what they are doing. They are transporting ions and nutrients from the blood. So how they can do that? Because they are having the vascular supply. So through these endothelial layers, this nutrition from the blood can reach to the CSF fluid. So this is how the CSF transports the nutrients to the brain. Now coming to the clinical application. Now if the fluid, which is 150 ml, it increases, it can happen due to obstruction or it can happen due to more production of the CSF. If there is mismatch between the circulation and the absorption, so this fluid will increase from 150 ml Last one. खड़े हो जाओ, आ जाओ तुम भी यहीं पे. So this condition is called as hydrocephalus. So this hydrocephalus condition can be congenital, it can be acquired. So what you can, खड़े होने बोला है आपको ना मैंने यहाँ पे, इधर. So it can be either congenital or acquired. So what the patient will present? Intracranial pressure तो होगा, देखने में कैसा लगेगा? Large head. So this is the picture of the hydrocephalus, where you can see enlarged head. So what are the problems that can arise due to the increase in the pressure? इंट्राक्रेनियल प्रेशर बढ़ गया सीएसएफ फ्लूइड की वजह से. सीएसएफ फ्लूइड ने जगह ले ली सारी. अगर सबएरेक्नोइड स्पेस में उतनी जगह है ही नहीं, इट इज अ थिन फिल्म layer but it is having more fluid, तो क्या होगा? It will do the compression of the brain parenchyma. So brain parenchyma कम हो जाएगा, प्रेशर ज़्यादा आएगा और फ्लूइड की स्पेस बढ़ती जाएगी, इसलिए द हाइट ऑफ द skull is increasing. So what we can do is we can do the surgery and place a shunt. तो shunt से क्या होगा? It is draining the CSF fluid. Now it is regularly producing the CSF. Either terminate the pathology, and if in congenital conditions it is not terminated, what we can do a permanent shunting through the abdomen. So here we can see a shunt has been put that is draining the CSF towards the abdominal cavity. So this will solve the purpose of draining the CSF which is being formed in the large amount. So this is a condition that can arise with the increased CSF pressure. Okay, how the CSF circulation takes place?